Give everybody a minute to get on here. Once I see the numbers start creeping up, we'll get started here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, like a mobile device. If you're on a larger screen, like a desktop computer, it should be to the right of the video. So I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So it looks like here I'll be starting here with Adam E. So if you happen to ask your question earlier today, more than an hour ago, before 3 p.m., before 4 p.m. Eastern time, or you asked your question over the weekend or something like that, and you're waiting to see your question get answered, no worries. Just copy and paste your question in there, and then we'll get to it later in the office hours. So without further ado here, we'll start here with Adam E. And also, just before we do that, I wanted to mention there will not be any office hours Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday due to a company-wide event. It's a Top Speed Golf event that we're all going to. So unfortunately, we're not going to have anybody to do the office hours. So no office hours this week. We'll be back, or no office hours Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, but I'll be back here Friday morning to do office hours at 11 a.m. So like I said, without further ado, let's get started here with Adam E. So Adam E says, "Hey Q, what are some drills I can do on the range that helps me swing from inside out? I'm working hard to cure a slice, but in having trouble with ridding myself of outside in path, and should be starting out with half swings first or jump right to full swings." You can do half swings first if you want to. If you're having trouble with the full swings, I would definitely start with some half swings and build it up from there. You can also go slower, go a little bit slower, may make it a little bit easier, and then build up the speed from there. But what I would recommend doing is working through our Never Slice Again course, which is actually, it's just a series of drills, which is exactly what you're looking for to get that club to swing more from the inside and start getting those nice, powerful draws. So if you want to check out that course, that's where I would go to get some drills to work on this. To get to the Never Slice Again course, click the house icon. That's going to take you to the homepage. So Dale B says, "Is it your swing speed the determining factor whether or not you should consider senior flex shaft?" Yeah, for the most part. So a senior flex shaft is going to be lighter typically, and it's typically going to have a little bit more whip to it. So the lightness of the shaft may possibly help you to swing it a little bit faster and maybe get a little bit more club head speed. And then if you have a slower club head speed, it may benefit you to have a little bit more whip in the shaft, because that may help you to get it to kick at the right time as well. So, but if you really want to know what shaft you need to have, you really just got to get professionally fitted. That's my best advice. If you don't get professionally fitted, then really you're just guessing. So if you don't want to guess if you need a senior shaft or not, then I recommend going and getting professionally fitted. Some good fitters that I know of are Club Champion. I don't have any affiliation with Club Champion whatsoever. I've just been there myself a few times and always had a great experience. Always got into the right stuff. I always felt like I was walking away with the right equipment. I even go in there and play dumb and ask questions just to see if they know the answers, and they always knew the right answers. So that's what I would recommend. They're located in major cities all over the country. There may not be one right next to you, but I'm guessing a big town close to you may have one. We have one in Orlando. There's several throughout Florida. So highly recommend it if you want to check them out. But like I said, I don't have any affiliation with them, but those would be the ones that I'd be looking forward to go to. But I'm sure there are great fitters all over the country. I just don't have a lot of experience with the other ones. All right, so Bob S says, "I'm having difficulty getting into a full finish position with weight on the lead foot and belt facing the target." It's hard to say why that would be without seeing your swing. But what I will say, excuse me, felt that sneeze coming on. What I will say is most likely what's going on is you're not loosening up this trail foot. So you got to let this foot come off the ground. You're more than likely keeping that foot on the ground and that foot on the ground. And that's if you keep that foot on the ground, it's going to act as an anchor for your hips. So we got to get pressure to that lead foot and let that foot come off the ground. Let that heel come off the ground and get all the way up on the toes as you're coming through. So that's what I would recommend doing to work through. Some great drills to kind of work on getting that shift to the lead side and getting all the way through and into that full finish position would be the stop chunking and topping course. More than likely, if you struggle with getting to your lead side, you probably struggle with some chunks and some tops and things like that. So it may be a good course for you all around. So to check out that stop chunking and topping course, click the instruction tab, or click the house icon. That's going to take you to the home page, and then scroll down the home page. You'll see a list of all the courses there. Select the stop chunking and topping course and get started on those drills to help you get to your lead side much better. So Gregory G says, I used to follow a different online system, but find that this one that is with clay is much easier to follow. I bow the wrist at the top of the backswing instead of when the club is parallel to the ground. Is that okay? It seems to work for me. I noticed I am compressing the ball much better now. Yeah, absolutely. And Dustin Johnson, John Rahm, new U.S. Open champion. They all are bowing that wrist at the top. That's completely fine to do. The main thing is that it has to be happening in the downswing too. So what we can't do, when I see a lot of people do when they're trying to get like the Dustin Johnson wrist or the John Rahm wrist, when they're trying to get this wrist position at the top, what happens is they just undo it in the downswing. So they just completely undo it. And that's not what we want to do. So you want to have it, and then you keep it basically all the way down as you're coming through. Now, if you're like Dustin Johnson, you get it like a crazy angle like that. You can undo it a little bit and be in a great position. If you look at Dustin Johnson, he's actually undoing it a little bit. His wrist at the top of the swing is like this. He's not like that at impact with his wrist. It's bowed, but it's not as bowed. So he is losing it a little bit. But usually what I see people do when they get that DJ wrist is they lose all of it, and they actually go too far at the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, it's actually great to do this at the top of the swing, but you got to keep it where it matters the most is where you're coming into impact and getting that face squared up, getting those hands in front. And if you're compressing the ball, as you mentioned, then I would say you're probably in good shape. You probably have it where you need to be with it. Gregory G goes on to say, also, if I bow at top, do I have to further shallow the club on the downswing? It just depends. The more you shallow it, the more you need to rotate. Basically, when we're saying shallowing the club, we're really just saying get the club on plane, right? Because when we have the club up here, we're above the plane. So we have to shallow it to get it onto the plane. So if you're already shallowing it, you don't need to keep shallowing it, because otherwise it may get too far behind you. And the more you shallow it, the more you need to rotate and get the hands more in front to be able to compensate for that. So it really just depends on how shallow you are to begin with. A good way to kind of guess, or not necessarily guess, but a good way to gauge if you're shallowing it enough is to pause, get a camera, be pointing down your toe line here, video yourself, and pause your swing when the lead arm is parallel to the ground here, and then see where that butt end of the club is going. If that butt end of the club is pointing outside the golf ball, so if I have the ball here, so if I'm set up to my ball here, and I have the camera, set up down my toe line here, and then I get to where I'm coming down in the downswing, and the butt end of the club is pointing outside the golf ball, that's good and shallowed out. If it's pointing inside the golf ball, it's like this, right? So if I'm like this in my swing, I'm steep. If I'm outside the golf ball, so you can see like this, right, I'm going to be in good shape. So this would be outside the golf ball. If I get that back up there, that's a good spot to be. That's plenty shallowed out. So John A says, where should your trail shoulder be at impact? Can you show a full swing path of that trail shoulder goes through? So really what you want to make sure with that trail shoulder is that it's moving down toward the golf ball. That's what you want to make sure of. What I see a lot of times when I get people, they're early extending, releasing early, the trail shoulder basically stops, right? And it kind of moves back this way. So if you look here, we're coming in, and the trail shoulder just kind of stops and the arm throws, right? And then the momentum of the club kind of brings the shoulder up and around. When you look at tour players who are having better contact, what happens is the shoulder kind of moves down, right? It's moving down and it's continuing to move, and it's going. It never really stops, right? It keeps moving down and through. So that comes from staying in your posture. So what I would try to feel like, if you're struggling with that, is almost like your shoulders rotate like a Ferris wheel. Most people's shoulders, right, if they're early extending and flipping, they don't really rotate at all. They square up to the ball, and then the momentum of their body kind of brings the shoulders around. What we want is we want to get the shoulder moving down and toward the golf ball and continuing to work under and around and rotating almost like a Ferris wheel. That's the feeling that you want to have with it. Jeffrey G says, lots of questions today. Sorry. No worries. That's what we're here for. So I may skip some of these and get to some of them, may come back to them just so more people can get their questions. Yeah, we have a lot of questions in here, so I may not answer all of your questions, Jeff. Okay, so Jeffrey G says, regarding hitting up on teed up balls, I don't think my brain allows me to do that. Pretty sure that my regimented brain subconsciously forces wherever my eyes are focused to be the bottom point of my swing. If I move the ball forward in my stance, that I just move the focus point of my eyes forward along with it, and my body subconsciously adjusts likewise. Would it make any sense to focus on, and then it cuts off? So what you can do, if you feel that way, then I would just focus on a point behind the ball, let the club bottom out there, and then hit up into the ball. That's what I'd recommend. Goes on to say, I often hear various instructors reference the difference between the low point on swings with the driver versus the low point on swings with irons. But isn't it really the difference between teed shots and unteed shots? I.e., if I'm on a par 3 tee box and hitting a teed up ball with a hybrid, or even say a 5-iron or 8-iron, shouldn't the ball position be further forward? No. So for iron shots, you want to be hitting them. You want the low point to be in front of the golf ball, right? So we want the low point to be on this side of the golf ball when we're hitting shots off the turf. Even if it's teed up, because that's the way an iron is intended to be hit. It's intended to be hit off of the turf. So when you're teeing up the ball on a par 3 and you're hitting a 5-iron, you're just teeing it up to give you a perfect lie. You wouldn't want to hit it like your driver. It's just not, it's going to go too high. It's not going to be, it's not going to be the launch and things that are intended there. So I would hit it, give yourself a perfect lie. Just tee it up enough, just enough to give yourself a perfect lie, and hit it just like you would out of the fairway at low point in front. And then with the driver, I don't have a driver in here today, but with the driver, we want the club to bottom out here and then have the club work up into the ball. That's going to allow you to get higher launch, lower spin, because with the driver, you're trying to hit it as far as you can, basically, right? High launch, low spin is going to give you the most distance. But when you're hitting on a par 3, you're trying to hit it a specific distance. And if you hit it like a driver, your distance is going to be very inconsistent. You may pop one and it goes way over the green, and then you may not hit one as good and it's way short. You're going to be much more consistent with your distance control if you hit it like a shot that's off the ground, get the low point in front. Then goes on to say, I know the tee height suggested roughly for the driver is the top of the driver to even with the ball's equator. But for a teed up ball with other clubs, what's the suggested tee height? For example, most golfers I know, they're hitting an iron from a par 3 tee box, almost always press the tee into the ground so that the ball ends up basically at ground level, almost as if the ball is not on a tee. Yeah. So basically when you're hitting an iron off the tee or something like that, you're really just teeing the ball up as if you had a perfect lie in the fairway. It's just sitting up just a little bit, because that's the intended way that club is meant to be hit. So yeah, driver, you're exactly right. Just generally half, the equator of the ball being about even with the top, the crown of the driver. And then for for shots that you would normally hit off the turf, just give yourself a perfect lie. That's all you're looking for, and that's why you see other people doing that. So Adam C said, one last question for iron shots. If I am wanting to add draw to my shot and would I play the ball more back in my stance? Same for the driver. Would I play the ball back in my stance? You could. For an iron, for sure, I would want to play the ball a little bit more back in the stance. It makes it easier to get the club to swing from the inside, because what makes the ball draw is getting the face closed to the path, right? So when I say that, I mean the face is the direction the club face is pointing at impact, and then the path is the direction the club is moving through impact. So just in extreme terms, if I want the ball to curve from right to left, I want to swing the club toward first base, and I want to have the face pointed more toward third base. So it'd be like that. That would be extreme. That'd be like a big hook if I actually did that. So it's easier because of the way the club comes down, right? Because the club's coming down on an inclined plane, right? It's not straight up and down. It's an inclined plane, right? So my club's moving to the right, moving to the right, moving to the right, turns the corner, moves to the left, moves to the left. So the further the ball's back in my stance, the more the club's going to be working out to the right. And then I just need to close the face when I do that, and I get the nice draw there. Now I say that with the iron because you're hitting the ball off of the ground, so you can hit down and through the golf ball when you do that more easily. But with the driver, if you are hitting the ball a lot, if you put the ball back in your stance, you're going to be hitting down on the ball a lot, and that can reduce the distance. So typically when you're hitting a draw with the driver, you want to be hitting up on the ball, have the ball forward in your stance, and hit up on the ball and close the face. Feel like the face is turning over. I feel like when you're coming through, like you're getting the face to be closed more like that. So this would be like a straight shot where the face is more straight up and down. And then this would be more like a draw where I'm feeling the face more closed as I'm coming through. That's what I would do to get the draw with the driver. So that way you're not hitting down on it. Because if you put it back in your stance, sure, I can get it to draw if I can get the face to close. But now I'm hitting it really, really low with a lot of spin. It's just not going to go very far when I do that. So I want to hit up on the ball, swing into outs, hit up on the ball, and then get that face turned over so that way I can get that face closed and hit that nice draw. So Jeffrey G, I may come back to yours just so I can answer other folks' questions. You got more questions there. So Tom M says, I understand that the hands lead the club head lead the club for irons, but this would be the same possible when hitting a driver when you hit up on the ball. Am I correct in my understanding? No, not exactly. If you think about when you're hitting up on the ball with a driver, you almost want to feel like you're hitting like a top spin forehand. So if you imagine I got tennis right here, I can actually have my hand in front, right? I can have my hand in front, swing up on it and de-loft it, right? And have my hand in front, so that's de-lofting it, and then hit up on it, right? That's the feeling that you want to have with your driver. It's the same kind of thing. So I'm coming in with my driver, I'm hitting up on it, but I have I have my hands in front just a little bit. Now at impact, because of where the ball is, right? The ball is more forward with the driver, right? The ball is more forward. So there's not going to be the appearance of very much shaffling. Typically there's just a little tiny bit there when we look at the better players. So we don't want to be hitting it like this, right? Hitting up on it like this. We want to be hitting up on it like this, and then we're de-lofting it as we're coming in. And this is an exaggeration. You're not really going to be de-lofting it this much, but it's like a top spin forehand as you're coming in. That's the feeling that you want to have with it. And that's going to allow you to hit up on it and then not have too much loft on it so that there's not a lot of spin. So you get that high launch and low spin. Whereas if I come in and I hit up on it by flipping the club up and adding loft, well, now I'm going to get even higher launch, but I'm going to get a lot of spin with that too. And it's just going to go up in the air a mile, and it's going to spin a bunch, and it's not going to go very far. So I want to get that high launch from hitting up on it, but I want to reduce the spin and not hit it too high by getting the hands in front a little bit, and that's going to allow me to get that nice booming ball flight like you see all the tour players get. So John S. says, could you explain the timing of Rory's drop move in relation to the weight shift and turn? I have to say NBC's golf coverage is brutal with Azinger replacing Johnny Miller. I have no comment on that. I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. But as far as Rory's dropping move, really it's happening as he's getting up to the top of the swing, right? And this is pretty much it's not just Rory. I think with Rory, it's more exaggerated than most players, which is why it's probably a little bit more noticeable. But pretty much all tour players are doing some sort of version of this. But what we're doing is, as we're getting up to the top of the swing, we're falling to the lead side and getting that flex in the legs, right? And then once we reach the top of the swing, now I'm using the ground because I've flexed my legs into the ground, and now I can open up, right? So really, it's as you're getting up to the top, you're starting to fall to the lead side. So a great drill to actually work on this is because the key to this is to load up early and to fall early, right? Most people are loading up at the top of the swing, and then they don't really ever fall. They just throw the club from there. So basically, they get up to the top, I'm loaded up, and then it's throwing of the arms. What we want to do is we want to load up right away, and then as we're getting about a little more than halfway up, we're actually starting to recenter as we're getting up to the top. And now I'm falling to my lead side. I'm getting the flex in my legs, and now I can use my body to open up and come to impact in the correct way. So the timing of it is about halfway back, a little more than halfway back in the backswing. He's recentering his body by falling to his lead side, getting some flex in the legs, and then he can use the ground. That's, it's more pronounced with him, but that's what pretty much all tour players are doing. All right, so Tom M says, this may already be on the website, but I would like to see some tips on golf exercises to build strength in right areas. Things I read online in books is all over the place. So there really isn't anything on our website about this. We do have a fitness section with Joe Yoon, but it's really just stretches. It's nothing about strength training. And the reason why we don't have anything on the website is because it's just not our expertise. Our expertise is not weight training for golf. So the way I look at it is, we are golf instruction. We can call ourselves experts. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an expert because there's always things to learn. I'm always learning things. But I would say that we're here for you to give you what we know, right? As far as golf instruction, technique, skill training, and things like that. And while, strength training and things like that has its place in golf instruction, in my opinion, it's really not, if your goal is to get better at golf, which is what my goal is for everybody, usually that's not what's going to give you most of your results. You hear about all the tour players doing it. And it's because it's their job. It's their job to do those things. I've done plenty of weight training, and I do feel like it makes me stronger and I can hit the ball a little bit further. But it's not, when we look at golf instruction, we try to look at the 80-20 approach. So what that means is that we're looking at the small amount of things that give you the most results. So what weight training falls into is it's a big block of these things that you can do that give you a small amount of your results, right? So the Top Speed Golf System, these are the 5 things that all the best players do. That's as far as technique is concerned, that's really what you need to be doing. We have our ball striking masterclass, which works on the skill training. Again, that's a big piece that's going to give you a lot of your results. That's really going to help you to lower your handicap. The speed system, right? That's, the 20-minute distance fix, club head speed training. There's no weight training involved in that. Everything in that course are the things that we know gets your club head speed up the most and helps you hit the ball the furthest. Weight training is not included in there because it's not one of the main things. Can it help? Absolutely. But the amount of time that you would have to spend in the gym to get results, out on the course is a lot more than the amount of time that you would have to spend just doing the 20-minute distance fix. So it's one thing if you're wanting to work out just for your health and things like that, but we don't have anything on it because it's just not our expertise. And I just don't believe, and Clay actually talks about this in the 20-minute distance fix, that it is what really gets you all the speed. You know, Bryson, he's doing all this working out and things like that. Sure, that's helping him, but he's doing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in the 20-minute distance fix too. So he's talking about swinging as hard as you can all the time, and that's what we talk about in the 20-minute distance fix, and that's really what, you know, a lot of what it comes down to. So, so yeah, that's why we don't do that. And the other way I think about it is, if I was looking for golf instruction, right, for golf tips, I'm not going to go to a fitness professional, right? Just like if you're looking for fitness tips, right, I wouldn't recommend going to a golf instructor. I'd recommend going to a fitness professional. So, and the reason why you find a lot of different stuff out there, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. Just like golf instruction, not everyone is right. Not everyone is wrong. There are lots of ways to do things, and everyone has different philosophies, which is why you're going to find all kinds of different stuff. So just find something that suits your eye, but unfortunately, you're just not going to find it on our website as far as weight training is concerned. So Shakar D says, do you have any suggestions to improve hip sway in order to make better contact with the ball first, then the ground afterwards? Shakar, I'd recommend working through our stable fluid spine course. So that's talking about having a nice stable spine throughout the swing. We talk about hip sway and things like that in there. So what I would recommend doing as far as just like a quick thing is really just adjusting your feel to get the desired result. So if you're really swaying your hips, then I would feel like you're loading up, but you're actually pushing your hips toward the target. So your swing would actually look more like this, right? So you're keeping that leg really angled in and driving the hip back. If you're swaying the hips, you're getting pressure on the outside of your foot, and you're probably doing something like this and not really turning your hips very much. So load up into that trail foot and then push the hip back toward the target. It's almost like if someone had a rope attached to your belt loop here, and they had it wrapped around, they're standing over there by the door, and as soon as you started your backswing, got pressure in there, they pulled on that rope and pulled you back. That's what you want to feel like as you're going up to the top. All right. It's probably going to feel like a weird position, you know, going from this to this, but you can see how much more coiled up and how more powerful I am, and how much more easy I can get to my lead side and get into that good impact position that I want. But the stable fluid spine course, you're going to want to work through those drills to get it to where it's second nature for you. To get to that, click the instruction tab, then click the Tasvi Golf System, then click the stable fluid spine course. All right, so Michael S. says, Q, on most of my fairway wood shots, I take 2 practice swings that lightly brush the grass. When I take my actual swing at the ball and chunk it, any suggestions on how to stop that action and why I'm doing that? Very frustrating. It's hard to say without seeing your swing, but most likely when you're chunking a shot, it's because of low point control. So when I say low point control, I'm talking about where the club comes down, reaches a low point, and then works back up. If you're chunking the ball, it usually means that your low point is occurring at or before the golf ball. So if I have my golf ball here and my low point is occurring at the ball, I can only, you know, basically hit it thin. That's my only option, is if my low point, it's going to be a thin shot. I may be lightly brazing or slightly brushing the grass when I do that, but if my low point is at the ball, my best case scenario is to thin it. If my low point's before the ball, then I'm most likely going to chunk it, I'm going to top it, or blade it, thin it. So what we need to do is we need to get the low point more in front of the golf ball. Now the low point, keep in mind, the low point is not where the club is contacting the ground. Usually on better shots, better ball strikers, the club is coming in, hitting the ground where the golf ball is, going down into the ground, the low point's occurring somewhere in the middle of that divot, and then the club comes up out of the ground, right? So that's what we need to have happen. So what I would look at is, first of all, fairway woods. Almost always I see ball positions too far forward with people who are chunking and topping. They put the ball too far forward. Well, look, it's going to be very hard for me to get my low point ahead of the golf ball if I have the ball too far forward. A lot of people do this because they get a wood in their hand and they just feel like they have to have the ball really far forward. And when you have the ball too far forward, it's very difficult to get that low point in front. So get that ball. What I like to do for a fairway wood for me is I get in my position here. You drop the club straight down. I'm just going to have the ball, a ball forward of that, right? So that's going to allow me to come in shallow and still be able to get my low point in front of the ball. And that's going to allow me to hit down and through. You want to take a little, depending on the lie, it really just depends on what kind of shot you're hitting. But generally, you do want to rough up the grass a little bit on these fairway wood shots. They're just typically not going to dig because the fairway wood usually doesn't have that hard edge on it, like a wedge does, right? A wedge, it doesn't take much to make much of it because it's got this hard edge on it. But a fairway wood, it's going to be, it's going to be a softer edge, so it's not going to be, it's going to be more of a grazing of the grass or a light roughing of the grass. Now, depending on the lie, if it's wet, really, really tight lie, you may take a little bit of a divot. But generally, it's not going to be much of a divot there. It's going to be more like a roughly grazing of the grass. So make sure that ball position is a little bit further back, a little bit ahead of the middle of the stance there, and really focus on hitting down and through the golf ball. And that should help out quite a bit. But without seeing your swing, it's difficult to say exactly what the issue might be. So Rick S. says, I've seen tour players hover the club above the ground during the setup with the driver. What is the purpose of this? It's really personal preference, but basically it's just to kind of get a clean takeaway, right? So instead of having the club sitting on the ground and then taking away from there, they'll hover the club and then take away from that. So that way they don't have to lift it up a little bit. So me, I prefer to set the club behind the ball and then just lift it up a tiny bit and then go. That's my preference. But some people might prefer to have it just hovering the whole time and then go from there. That's what Clay does. Clay hovers the club right behind the ball and goes from there. Some people prefer it because that's more of where the club's going to be. Because at address, if you have the club on the ground, it's pretty far from where it's going to be at impact. So if you hover the club, it's closer to where it's going to be at impact. And, I think that's why a lot of people do that. But it hasn't ever been an issue for me. I've always done it that way, just never really changed it. But again, it's a personal preference thing. And it gives you two things. One, it maybe gives you a little bit cleaner of a takeaway. And then two, it gives you closer to what impact's going to look like, because your club's going to be more above the ground at impact than on the ground, right? Your club's not going to be sitting on the ground when it comes to impact. Whereas with an iron shot, right, it's going to be on the ground. You want to get that club into the ground as you're coming into impact. All right, so Steve A says, during the downswing while releasing your lag and transferring weight to the left side, what percentage of your weight is posted on the left side as the club impact the ball and ascending through impact? It's about 75-80% of the pressure, the total pressure in your feet. 75-80% of that's going to be in your lead side. When they measured tour players, that's what they found, that about 75-80% of the pressure is in the lead foot there at impact. So Mark S says, on bunker shots, how do you hit shot with ball below feet, hit shot with ball above your feet, hit shot with downhill lie? Those are going to be really tough shots. You hit them just like any other shot. It's just that you got to expect the ball to go a little bit left when it's above your feet, a little bit more to the right when it's below your feet, and then it's going to come out lower when it's those are the toughest one. When you get a downhill lie, the ball's going to come out lower out of the bunker, and it's going to be harder to stop. So you just got to go with the slopes and understand what the ball is going to go out of the slope. So if it's above the feet, you're taking the same bunker shot that ball is just going to go more to the left out of the bunker than it normally would. And if it's below your feet, if I'm going down below, it's going to go more to the right than it normally would. And then if I'm going down, right, I want to adjust my body, adjust my shoulders to go with the slope. And then you got to expect that ball to come out low. So, but it's the same as any other bunker shot. You just want to go with the slope and understand that the ball is going to do a little something different because of those shots or because of those slopes. And just like a downhill lie, an uphill lie, those are generally the easiest ones when they kind of roll up the slope of the bunker a little bit, because you can get under it a little bit more and you can get the ball to go up higher and land softer. Those are usually the easiest ones out of the bunker. So Ken P says, I am left-handed but play right-handed. Is there an advantage to concentrating lag with left hand, or what would you recommend? Is there an advantage to concentrate lag with my left hand, or what do you recommend? Is there an advantage to concentrate lag with? Ken, I'm not really sure what you mean. Concentrate lag. Concentrate lag with. Ken, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Can you try asking it a different way? Jeffrey G says, sorry, I've been saving questions for a while because couldn't watch this for a while. Then didn't know there was a max char or character count. So text, I had pre-typed and wasted, was cut off, but you answered my questions perfectly. Thanks. No problem. All right. John S says, thanks, Q. No problem. John. Ed D says, hi, Q. Your go-to drill on forward shafting really, really helped. Played yesterday and felt like I was finally getting open. Totally roasted a lot of drives. That's great. And hit some great irons too. My question is about what gets talked about as the vertical force. Do you feel that this is just using of the ground to rapidly open the hips rather than pushing up? Let's talk about its vertical force. So I'm not really sure exactly what your question is, but my question is about what gets talked about vertical force. Do you feel that is just using of the ground to rapidly open the hips rather than pushing up? Well, if you just push up, you need vertical forces, and then you need, so a vertical force is what I'd say is a normal force. So a normal force is a force that's perpendicular, right? So perpendicular to the ground. So if I'm pushing straight, if I just push my leg straight down, right, I'm just going to move my hip up. Right? That's just going to go up. Well, I actually need to rotate too. So I need shear forces, and those are forces that are parallel with the ground. So you're going to have force, vertical force into the ground just from the weight of your body and the force of your swing, right? So most people, if they just push down into the ground, they're just going to push their body up, right? They're just going to be doing that. You need to push out away from it. It's almost like the way I equate it to is the feeling of standing on top of a pickle jar and you're trying to twist the lid of the pickle jar. That's what you're trying to feel in your feet, right? So you're pushing down into the ground with the weight of your body, but you need to feel shear forces. You need to feel like with this leg, right, I'm pushing back behind me like that, and that's pushing my hip that way. And then with this leg, I'm pushing out away from me, right, and that's pushing or opening my body that way. So when I'm coming down in the downswing, I'm really feeling like I'm opening up as I'm coming through. I'm pushing down into the ground. I'm putting forces, vertical forces into the ground because of the weight of my body. But I need to have those shear forces in order to actually rotate my body. Because if I just have the weight of my body, the forces of my body, and I just push back into those, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to jump up. There's not going to be any rotation. I need those shear forces, that twist in the lid of the pickle jar feeling, to get the hips to open up. So David H says, leaving all my long putts short, what are some good drills to help me dial in putting to keep away from three putting consistently? If you're hitting your long putts short, you're probably mishitting those putts. Putting is very, very important to hit the ball in the center of the face, especially on those long putts. Right? If you toe a putt or heel a putt, it's just not going to get there. So what I'd recommend doing is something called the gate drill. And I don't have ability to set that up in here. But basically what you do is I would hit your long putts, right? But I would set a tee on the outside and on the inside of your putter. So that I put a couple tees, one on the outside and one on the inside, and make it just barely wide enough for your putter to fit through there. And then put the ball right in between them and hit some long putts. And then you're going to get, if you hit the tee, you're going to get some feedback on that, and really, really focus on hitting the ball in the center of the face. And I imagine your putting, your lag putting is going to get a lot better because you're going to hit those putts a lot more solid. I would imagine that's what's going on. It's hard to say without actually seeing and, witnessing what's going on, but generally that's typically the case. You're not hitting those putts solid, and that's why you're leaving them short. So work on that tried and true gate drill, and start hitting those putts more solid, and I imagine you'll start getting them to the hole. So Gregory G, says, on that issue on hovering the driver at setup, just so I understand, you can hover it a little bit off the ground, not necessarily flush with the ball, correct? You can hover it. It doesn't matter where at address. I'm just going to be honest with you here. It does not matter one bit where you have the club at address. It just doesn't. It only matters how you deliver the club to the ball at impact. So you do whatever you want to do at address to deliver the club the best way at impact, right? All I was saying about hovering the club is that it can give people a better visual representation of how to deliver that club at impact by doing that. I didn't find like it made any difference to me. So I just kept doing what I was doing. I kept the club on the ground initially, and then I just barely lift it up and then bring it back. That's how I start my swing. So I've got it here. I put it, I have it on the ground, kind of tapping it on the ground, and then I tap it and I lift it up just a hair, and then I go. Clay, he gets in here and he's hovering the club, and then he goes back. That's just how he does it. And there's a lot of players that do it that way and do it really well. Look at Justin Thomas, Ricky Fowler, Phil Mickelson, I believe, does it. There's a lot of great players that do that. Now you can hover the club a foot above the ball, and as long as you bring that club into impact with a good delivery, it's fine to do that. There's lots of ways to do it. You just have to find what works best for you. Address, a lot of the stuff, and then basically what it comes down to is a good setup sets up a good backswing, a good backswing sets up a good downswing, a good downswing sets up a good impact. So if you're doing something in your setup that's kind of setting everything off, then it would be good, to try to tinker with it. But just to start hovering the club to hover the club, you're going to spend some time doing that when you could be. That's why I didn't spend any time trying to practice it, because I tried it a couple of times and it made zero difference. I hit the ball the same. So, but it may be different from you. Maybe you hover the club and then all of a sudden you're hitting the ball great, and that may be something you want to implement into your swing. So you can have it above, below. You can line the ball on the heel, the toe, wherever you want, as long as the club is delivered to the ball the right way at impact. That is the only thing that matters. All right, so Tom M says, Q, when hitting out of thick rough, I heard you should have a tighter grip with the left hand to keep the club from twisting. Is that true? You certainly could. That's not something I really think about doing. It's not something I would really necessarily try to do. It might be just by virtue of because you're having to swing harder through the rough, the grip gets a little bit tighter. The faster this club swings, the more force I got to put into this handle, right? So if I swing the club, if I'm holding this club lightly just so I can swing it like this, and then all of a sudden I swing this club as fast as I can with the same amount of grip pressure, the club's going to go flying out of my hands. And you're going to do this intuitively. And I can prove it to you by, just have a buddy hold this club out in front of you like this, and just hold it as lightly as you possibly can to be able to hold it in your hand, right? So it doesn't fall out of your hand, right? You're holding it just firmly enough to where it's not moving anywhere. And then have somebody pull on the other end of it. Instinctually, what you're going to do is you're going to tighten your hand. And that's what happens when you come into contact in the rough, because you're feeling yourself go through the rough and you're swinging hard to get through the rough. Instinctually, you're going to put more pressure into the grip to make that happen. So yes, that is what happens, but it's not something you should be thinking about necessarily at address. Like, I got to swing this club a lot harder, because then you're going to tense up and you're most likely not going to hit a good swing. So just let you need to swing a little bit harder out of the deep rough. So let that actually tighten the grip, and not actually tighten the grip, because that may actually make you swing slower. So Gregory G says, hey Q, had asked a question earlier about shallowing club when you bow the wrist, but missed the answer. Do I need to further shallow the club out if I bow the wrist at top of the backswing? So if you miss the answer to your question, all you have to do is watch the archived office hours. Since we have a lot of questions today, I'm going to keep answering the questions. If we didn't have a lot of questions, then I would answer it again. But we do have a lot of questions. So go to the archived office hours from the office hours highlights, and you'll be able to see the question answered from there. So Ed D says, thanks, Q. You're answering my question. Xanthely, no problem, Ed. Charles R says, most excellent answer on the shear forces, Q. No problem, Charles. Kempe says, is there an advantage to maintaining lag, concentrating on left-hand bow as opposed to right-hand wrist extension, and then it cut off? So what you're talking about is relative feel, right? So feel is relative. So it's going to be different for everybody, right? So you may find that you do better concentrating on the left hand, and you may find better that you do it with the right hand. You may find that you do it better concentrating on both at the same time. So you just have to experiment with it and see what works best for you. The advantage is what works best for you, and everyone's feel is going to be different. So usually when I'm working with a student, we're trying to get something to happen, I'll try to give them a few different feels, because everyone's a little bit different, right? So some people, with working on squaring the face, right? They like me personally, when I'm thinking about controlling the face, I have the most success when I'm thinking about my lead hand, right? When I'm thinking about that with my lead hand, or pointing the emblem of my glove in a position and bending it back and forth, that helps me control the face. Whereas other players, it's the trail hand. If they think about how the trail hand is coming in, it helps them to control the face. Some players need to feel how both are working, right? So you got to find the feeling that works the best for you. There's no necessarily right answer to that. It really just comes down to what works best for you. So Richard C says, I saw a video of my driver swing recently on follow through when my arms are extended at chest height. My trail leg is bent and I'm actually leaning backwards. Any tips? Man, I need to see what did you say? The height, my trail leg is bent. I'm actually leaning backwards. So you're saying you're coming in and you're kind of like this, right? That's more than likely because you're not shifting. You're probably on your back foot. So you're not getting your weight to your lead side. I'd work on something called the step drill. And in this drill, what you're doing is you're starting with your feet together, and you're not hitting balls with this. It's just a step drill to get the feeling of getting that momentum shift going forward, getting that pressure to the lead foot. And what you're going to do is you're going to start with your feet together. And as soon as this club starts going back, I want you to start stepping forward, right? And then you're going to get that foot on the ground, and then start the downswing and come all the way around into a full finish. Do some of those, and then take some normal practice swings, where you're replicating that same motion, but now you have the feet apart. So I'm loading up, and then I'm shifting to my lead side, getting that same feeling at impact, and then I'd add the golf ball and do it that way. That's what I would recommend doing. So do the step drill, get that momentum shift, and it should start working a lot better. So Kyle R says, how close should the shaft angle be at impact to the shaft angle at address? It really depends. I mean, again, we're talking about address versus impact. You can have a lot of different things at address. If you look at Keegan Bradley, right? Keegan Bradley, he's like this, right? His shaft at impact is probably a little bit higher than it is at address, right? You look at someone like Louis Oosthuizen, who stands a little bit more upright. His shaft is definitely lower as it comes in, right? So there's just no tried and true answer to that. You can have it be above or below depending on where you're starting it out at, right? And then if you're talking about it from this angle, right, you can have the hands more like this. I actually have in my setup, I actually set up with my hands pretty far forward, right? So my shaft angle at address is pretty close. You know, this is my shaft angle at address. My shaft angle at impact is pretty close to what it is at address. If you look at somebody like Adam Scott sets up with the shaft it's pretty close. It's just barely leaning forward. And then at impact, he's more like this, right? Dustin Johnson, same kind of thing. So, you know, it's not, again, we're talking about when you look at address positions, there can be a lot of different things going on. The closer you get to impact is when you're going to see players look very, very similar, right? So when you look at tour players, you're going to see a lot of different address positions, right? A lot of different. You're going to see some that are more bent over, less bent over, some closer to the ball, some further to the golf ball, some with more press, some with the club straight up and down, you know, wide stance, narrow stance. You're going to see all kinds of things. And then same thing with the takeaway, right? We're further away from impact. With the takeaway, you're going to see some really, really wide takeaways. You're going to see some little bit folding up takeaways. You don't see a lot of picking the club up right away. It's pretty rare. Usually it's somewhere on the widest side. You're going to see some takeaways that go inside the hands, outside the hands. You're going to see some that go right in line with the hands and everything in between. And you're just going to see a lot of different things. But when we get down into this area, right, in this area here, these tour players, they look very similar. All of them look very, very similar because they're a lot closer to impact. And that's when things matter the most. So, you know, setup and things, they matter, but they only matter in the sense relative to you. Do they help you get into a better impact position, right? And if they don't, you know, if you're doing something in your setup that's causing you to have a bad backswing and that's causing you to have a bad downswing and poor impact, then it's worth changing. But if it doesn't, then it's not something you want to worry about. But I will tell you, at impact, you want to have this club flush to the ground, right? The sole flush to the ground, and you want to have it leaning forward a little bit. You know, your average tour player is going to take about 30% of the loft off of the club, right? So if you have, let's say, you know, so this is a 56-degree wedge. Let's use a pitching wedge because I think the angles will be a little bit easier. So a pitching wedge is somewhere in the neighborhood of 48 degrees, right? So if you took 30% of the loft off of that, that would be, you know, 14 degrees or something like that, right? So at impact with a pitching wedge, the tour player is going to have the shaft leaning forward about 14 degrees, and they're going to have that club flush to the ground, right? So that's what that's going to look like. So if you address the ball like this, that's your difference between your impact and your address position. You look at this, typically when you look at tour players, they're actually going to have the toe up just a little bit. They're going to have the toe up just a little bit. So the handle typically comes in a little bit higher. But again, there's some players like Keegan Bradley who have the handle really, really low, and then they're a lot higher. And there's going to be some players that have it flush, and because they have shaft lean from this angle, it will look like it's a little bit lower. So it really just depends on, you know, what the setup position is to begin with. There's no right or wrong answer there. So Gregory G says, with the driver, should the release also be about 45 degrees past impact? Yeah, so we measured all the major winners from the past 20 plus years, and the average for a driver was about 41 degrees out in front. We say 45 because that's an easy angle to see in the head, right? We know what 90 is. It's half of 90, right? So it's an easy angle to see in your mind. Now there are some tour players that are like 55 degrees out in front. If you look at Dustin Johnson, he's releasing the club way, way further out in front. But there are also some players that release it a little bit earlier, more toward the 31, 32 degree range with the driver. So like a Justin Rose, he releases the club a little bit earlier. Still well out in front, but a little bit on the earlier side. But the average was 41 point something, I think. And with the iron, it can be a little bit more than that, or excuse me, a little bit less than that. So you may see, somewhere in the upper 30s with irons typically. With wedges, because they try to drive the wedges in so low, a lot of times they will be a little bit later out in front. So it really just depends on the club. The upper irons, you may see a little bit of an early release. The lower irons, you see a little bit later release because of how they hit them. Tour players hit them. They typically get a little bit more forward shaftling with those clubs, resulting in a little bit later release. All right, so let me scroll down. About 5 minutes left. There was Jeff's questions that I skipped. So Jeffrey G says, read my first question. The rest of what would it make sense to focus on the ground an inch or two before the ball so that it becomes my low point, or is there a better method that you would recommend? Yeah. So if what he was talking about before was that where he focuses is where the club bottoms out. So yeah, focus on a point before the golf ball, and if you're trying to hit up on the ball, that should help you to hit more up on it. And then goes on to say, read to my earlier question 2, should ball position for all clubs be further forward when hitting off the tees? What tee height do you recommend for long irons, short irons, hybrids? So any club that's intended to be hit off the ground, I would just tee it up enough to give you a perfect lie. With the exception of like a 3-wood. A 3-wood you could hit a little bit like a driver if you're just trying to launch it out there and hit it as far as you can. And again, I would just tee it up to where about half of the ball is above the equator, which isn't going to be very high because the 3-wood's fairly shallow club. And you can hit it like that if you want to. It can help you hit a little bit further. But for the most part, you just need to play the ball pretty much in the same place. You don't need to play it further. Play it like you're hitting it off the ground if the club's intended to be hit off the ground. All right, so let me see if there's any more questions left. So we got a couple more. Gregory G says, with the driver. Okay, we already got that one. Adam E says, your time is very much appreciated, Q. Thanks for being here for all of us. No problem. So just a reminder, there will be no office hours Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. I'll be back Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We have a company-wide kind of meeting thing for a few days. So nobody to fill in to do the office hours. So apologize in advance if you guys got some questions, but come Friday with some good questions, and we'll get to answering them there. So with that, since we don't have any more questions left, we'll go ahead and end it right there. Everybody have a good rest of the week, and I'll see y'all on Friday. Have a good evening. Talk to you next time.